delighted to be joined by the hardest working man in showbiz. Andy Mitten is with us. Good evening, Andy. Happy Christmas.
Thank you. Good to be joining you.
You're just preparing for the return to the madness, I suspect.
Yeah, I didn't go to the World Cup. It's the first tournament I've missed for over a decade. And I thought I might be able to ease off a little bit. And then a low-profile individual called Cristiano Ronaldo gave an interview and then followed it up with, his contract was terminated. And then Manchester United went up for sale. And then Manchester United went on a warm weather break, which was actually a wet weather break in Andalusia. And Erik was good enough to give us a really good interview. So that kept us very, very busy and obviously watching the World Cup finals like everybody else.
Was it a conscious decision not to go to the World Cup?
Yeah, I was asked to go and I said no. That was for various reasons. I felt I travelled too much before the World Cup finals. I didn't agree with it being in Qatar. I'd been to Qatar. I went out there in 2015 to interview Xavi Hernandez, and I felt my time would be better spent with my family. And I also knew that Manchester United would be going out to Spain. So a combination of reasons, really. But yeah, I had the chance to go and I declined it. I would fully expect to go to the next Euros and the next World Cup.
A month is a very long time in the world of Manchester United. Watching the game last night against Burnley, I'm looking at Alejandro Garnacho and thinking, God, yeah, that goal in the last minute in their last game against Fulham, where we thought this new superstar was born, and I haven't even thought about him, and that's only a month ago. So much has gone on in the world of football, and you touched on some of it there. Let's talk about Cristiano Ronaldo then and how it was handled. From the outside, it seemed very straightforward for Manchester United with the news, I think within an hour of that Fulham game, that this interview had taken place with Piers Morgan and the fallout started instantly. Can you give us any insight into how those initial hours played out? And was there ever any doubt that Manchester United had seen the last of Cristiano Ronaldo?
Well, he wanted to go and the club knew that he wanted to go. After the Fulham game, the news broke. I didn't know anything before that. People at Manchester United didn't. Any idea of having a few days with it being quiet when I heard that news. And the next morning, when you do what I do, it was just absolutely crazy because he's such box office and it's part of my job. And I spoke honestly. I've got decent contacts. I work to get decent insight, and everything I've been told had been pretty consistent over the previous months that he wanted to go, and Manchester United were not going to stand in his way. Equally, they were not going to pay up his contracts, and I didn't blame the club for that. I felt that Erik ten Hag was firm but fair with him, and we saw a few incidents, leaving Old Trafford twice while the match was on. And I know that there are people in Old Trafford who actually felt sympathy for Cristiano Ronaldo, basically because he can no longer do what he wants to do. And he's not the first footballer to struggle with the reality of his decline. There have been many others. And right from that first morning, I tried to make a point that it's usually an unedifying end to your career as a top footballer. I've seen it happen so many times. Great players like Roy Keane didn't leave Old Trafford by the front door. They went out the back door. Ruud van Nistelrooy. So many lesser names than those who normally take a few years to come round to thinking, actually, I may not have behaved in the best way. I remember going to see Van Nistelrooy in Madrid 2 years after he'd left Old Trafford. And for the first time publicly, he basically said, yeah, I got it wrong. We've not seen any evidence of Cristiano Ronaldo doing that. And someone said to me, his greatest strength is now his greatest weakness, his self-belief. And that made him feel like he was invincible. That drive made him the best player in the world. Equally, because he still believes he's that player and he's not, that's causing all kinds of problems.
Andy, sorry, you might pick up again then just on the news of the sale of the club from the Glazers and how it developed and maybe how long it's going to last, the whole process.
Yeah, the news was a surprise. There's been speculation for years, and during that time, I, as a journalist, have built up some pretty good contacts in the financial world, and I'd go to them and say, I'm hearing this, someone has told me that, and I'd struggle to stand up the stories. So when there was that very definitive announcement that investment was being sought or a full sale, it was welcomed by Manchester United fans who've never liked the Glazers, and B, was a bit of a surprise as well. As for a timescale, I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. Rain, who helped with Chelsea's sale, have been appointed. They will be looking for suitors. I was going to say suitable suitors then, but it might just be that the people who are prepared to pay the most get the club from the Glazers. As a Manchester United fan, what concerns me is that the next owners are responsible owners, that they're better owners than the Glazers, that there's not a repeat of a highly leveraged buyout, and that the same mistakes are not made with poor communication, lack of investment into the stadium, for example. But it's going to be very expensive if whoever takes control of Manchester United. And call me idealistic, but I would like to see the fans have some sort of influence. I believe if shares were offered to Manchester United fans, then the uptake would be significant, certainly a lot more than when the club first went public in 1991. So any wise owner should be trying to embrace the fans and thinking, we all want the same thing here. We want success. Yes, it's going to be difficult against clubs which have got state backing, far more difficult than it was when the Glazers first started buying up shares in Manchester United, when it was basically Manchester United and Arsenal. I remember speaking to Roy Keane in 2004 in an interview, and he said, I know the fans' rivalries with City or with Liverpool, but for the players, it's all about Arsenal. That's changed a lot now. You can see that there's some seriously wealthy rivals in the Premier League. I spoke to Erik ten Hag about this a couple of weeks ago, and the names of Newcastle and West Ham United are suddenly being mentioned alongside the more established giants.
When you see numbers been talked about of 6.5, 7 billion as a potential fee that the Glazers could receive, it seems obvious as to why they would want to sell now. Are there other factors as to why they feel this is the time to get out of Manchester United, considering it has been such a cash cow for them?
Well, if they're going to get anything close to those figures, it would be the most remarkable investment, because they didn't pay anything close to 1 billion. So if they're getting fives and sixes, in some ways you've got to say, wow, they've really seen an opportunity there. But they've caused so much disarray. They've split the fan base. The club is laden with debt. The dividend payments they took out were controversial. And issues like the stadium, Old Trafford was continually redeveloped before they took charge, and that has stalled, and that concerns me as a Manchester United fan. I think anyone who comes in now has got to invest in the stadium. It's going to be expensive, especially with the cost of raw materials and energy. And they've also got to go up against very, very wealthy rivals. It's not going to be easy for anybody. How do you go up against Saudi Arabia, for example? It's really difficult. It's getting to the level where even if you're the most wealthy British person, for example, Jim Ratcliffe, who put an offer in for Chelsea, he's got deep, deep pockets, but compared to sovereign state funds, they don't look so deep. Now, financial fair play should sort this out. It should be a cure for this, but there are ways around it, and clubs have found ways around it, and that's what makes it difficult. I think Manchester United is still an extremely attractive name for somebody to buy into, for somebody to own. It is a trophy asset. It's a huge football club. It's the biggest football club in England. I think it's one of the three biggest football clubs in the world, along with Barcelona and Real Madrid. And with that, size is going to come a hefty price tag.
And it does mean that there are only certain suitors possible who could afford to pay that much. And as you say, there is a Jim Ratcliffe who could be the perfect scenario, said to be a Manchester United fan, deep pockets. Maybe because Rain are involved, it'll be an American investor. But there is the other side, that how do you contest and compete with state-backed clubs? You become a state-backed club yourself. Would you be nervous about the possibility of a state-backed investment fund potentially being in the mix for Manchester United?
Yeah, I would. And I could see another split coming, because you'll get loads of Manchester United fans who just want to sign Mbappe. They just want the best players to come. They're not really bothered about the ownership. They don't really care who owns the club, as long as new players are brought in and Manchester United are successful. And there's something quite sad about that. Equally, there are a lot of Manchester United fans who wouldn't want that, who've spent time being critical of the ownership models behind Manchester City or Chelsea when they had an oligarch in Roman Abramovich, or Paris Saint-Germain, who've been critical of Newcastle United. Realistically, who can afford to buy Manchester United? You covered it there. It's the American private equity hedge funds. There's a strong American ownership now in the Premier League. Or it looks like state-backed funds. Russia is out of the equation because of the geopolitics going on there. China's gone quiet with football. If you go back 3 or 4 years, they were offering bigger wages than almost anybody. And then you look at the emerging economies. I've seen India mentioned a couple of times, but whoever would take over Manchester United would need billions. And that is a huge outlay, even for some of the richest people in the world.
When you talk about the fan base there and how vast it is, do you think that they would be a powerful enough voice if Qatar came in and said they wanted to buy Manchester United, that they'd be able to rise up and stop that happening?
Some people wouldn't want to stop that happening. That's the issue that you've got. What happened after the Glazers took over is the match-going fan base was split, and that led to the formation of FC United, who've been a success. So a few thousand hardcore Manchester United fans, hardcore, people who went home and away, walked. They said, we can't stomach this. We're going to have courage in our convictions, and we're going to go and support FC United. The vast majority continued to support Manchester United. There was a real-life split there. It was awful in the real world, not online, in the real world. And since then, United's fan base has grown significantly. So you see the popularity, partly because the Premier League's become more and more popular, and the different demographics want different things. I see that in my own journalism. If I write articles over issues which I felt strongly about over the years, including the stadium redevelopment or ticket prices, that is of no concern to a lot of people who call themselves Manchester United fans, because they've never been to a game. They'll never go to a game. There's nothing wrong with that. But different people want different things. And I remember when I first wrote about Old Trafford needing to be expanded, needing to be redeveloped, I got a lot of comments like, never mind that, we need to be signing whoever, the best player in the world was at the moment. So people want very, very different things. I think whoever takes over Manchester United has got to be a responsible custodian. I'd like to see them involve the supporters. I'd like to see them be significantly better owners than the Glazers, not load debt onto the club, and just harness that global support. But I'm sounding idealistic there. And is an American hedge fund going to share those ideals? Is a sovereign wealth fund going to share those ideals? Yes and no. So it's going to be very interesting what's going to happen next.
In the short term, what impact will the sale of the club have on Erik ten Hag's ability to strengthen the squad in January? With Cristiano Ronaldo gone, perhaps there is an opening, though you watched them last night again, there's such an array of attacking talent there. Will this be a case of the Glazers saving as much money as they possibly can until they leave?
It's a really good question. I sat opposite Erik ten Hag a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying, I love this player, I love that player. Yeah, we're looking to strengthen, bring a new forward in January, but that forward's got to be good enough. And I was nodding along, yeah, he's great, but where's the shock there? Top manager likes top footballers. Who wouldn't in his position? Who wouldn't want some of the best players in the world? The question is, who's going to pay for them? United overspent last summer, bringing in all those players who've done well, and I think Ten Hag's doing well. I think Manchester United, from a a playing perspective, we're actually in quite a good place. Players like Casemiro have been fantastic. And I walked out of that interview with Ten Hag thinking, this man really knows what he's doing. He's really handling himself well. He handled the Cristiano Ronaldo situation well. He's made the big calls. He's got them right. He's dropped key players. And given unlimited funds, or a lot of funds, which Manchester United's manager should expect to have, I think he'd get Manchester United back up there again. But we don't know what them funds are going to be. Because as you said, why would the Glazers sanction a signing of a £100 million footballer when the club might be sold? I think a Manchester United who are in the Champions League is a more attractive buy for anybody. But the big issues are still the stadium redevelopment. And I'm sounding uncertain because I am. Because nobody knows the answer to this. Not even Erik Ten Hag. He's going to need reassurance. But where's that reassurance going to come from? Richard Arnold above him? John Murta? They wouldn't even know if their jobs are going to be safe. Look what happened at Chelsea. The new owners came in, got rid of almost everybody, as they slowly try and turn Chelsea into Brighton and Hove Albion from last year. And we've seen them tumble down the table. So there could be a really, really bumpy ride ahead if the new owners come in, and the new owners are bad. If they're new owners at all, because Avram Glazer said last week, it might just be investment that we're looking for. Of course, if they could keep control, that would be ideal for them. But who's going to put millions or billions in not to have control of Manchester United? That would seem like a bad idea, even to someone who isn't sophisticated in the financial markets.
And the new owners may not want Manchester United to become the new Ajax, which could be a problem for Erik Ten Hag.
Yeah, he's recruited from Ajax pretty well, actually. I don't think anyone's complaining about Lisandro Martinez. Anthony will find his feet, but he's exciting. He mentioned a couple of Ajax players in that interview, and former ones, Frenkie de Jong and Jude Bellingham, who's not played at Ajax. But yeah, the manager wants certainty, and if you're the manager of Manchester United, you would expect to be able to go for top players. He's been able to do that. But what if the new owners come in and it's another highly leveraged buyout, and they say, actually, the squad doesn't need that much retooling? I always remember speaking to Ed Woodward just after he'd taken control, 2 or 3 weeks after. And he said, this squad doesn't need much retooling. And David Moyes was saying completely the opposite of that. And Moyes actually, in hindsight, was right, because the squad which he inherited was an aging one, which was on the way down. And United have not won the league since. So if everyone's not pulling in the same direction, there could be more trouble ahead.
Everyone probably needs a reminder of where Manchester United are right now. So they're 5th in the Premier League table. They're 3 points behind Spurs in 4th, though they have a game in hand. They're 11 points behind Arsenal at the top, and it is a favourable Christmas run of fixtures on paper. Nottingham Forest at home next Tuesday, then a trip to Wolves, and then at home against Bournemouth before a couple of tough games against City and Arsenal in the middle of January. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens with the players coming back from the World Cup, because so much of the conversation has been about fatigue. But watching the players who were at the World Cup last night, it was actually their sharpness that really stood out. The fact that they've been playing games, they've been in a high-intensity environment in comparison to the players who were, as you say, were at their sort of pre-season warm weather training camp. Like Marcus Rashford looked on a different level to everybody else last night.
I think Erik Ten Hag's getting the best out of a lot of his players. He's making the right calls. Marcus Rashford is a perfect example of that. He was well aware of the issue of the World Cup. He was talking about this as long ago as June, thinking that he's going to have players coming back into training in 3 states of mind. The ones who've been successful in the World Cup, and that doesn't just mean winning it. Harry Maguire had a good World Cup. The ones who will be disappointed, and the ones who haven't featured. And it's not unique to him, because other clubs will have that issue. I think Manchester United players fared well in the World Cup finals. And I'm actually enjoying this season. United have played some really good football, not just had really good results. That game against Tottenham was one of the best I've seen for years. And then United went to Chelsea and attacked Chelsea This wasn't a counter-attack. This was Manchester United thinking, wait a minute, we've got Rafael Varane here, we've got Casemiro. We can do these. And Liverpool have been beaten at Old Trafford. Arsenal have been beaten at Old Trafford. That was a great game. Arsenal were brilliant. Maybe Manchester United didn't deserve to win that, but did. And if I look at the home record now, lots of clean sheets, won 8, drawn 1, lost 2. And when you think that United lost 2 of the first 4 home matches, that's really impressive. As you say, on paper now, you've got teams who are lower down in the league, win them, and then Manchester United can start seriously thinking about solidifying a place in that top 4, winning a cup competition. There's been no trophy since 2017. United have done a lot of hard work this year, definitely improving. I think that Ten Hag knows why he lost to Manchester derby. Equally, he knows that Manchester City are still a level above Manchester United. But I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to the season resuming. And I was pleased with the performance and the goals against Burnley.
And it is going to be interesting to see how Marcus Rashford kicks on over the next few weeks and months, because he still has just the 4 Premier League goals so far this season. But the expectation coming off the World Cup is almost at a level as when he broke through first, that he is back and he's back to his very best. And you know, he certainly helped that last night with the quality of the goal. Have you got a sense of a change in Rashford this season?
Yeah, totally. I sensed that from the pre-season. I spoke to him in Perth. He'd had a good pre-season. His point was, this is only the second time in my career I've had a full pre-season. United did well pre-season. Other players, including Anthony Martial, did well. I think they respect Erik Ten Hag. They trust him, which is really good. When Manchester United lost that derby game, there was a notable lack of briefs against the manager, and you wouldn't have had that last season. So he's getting the best out of players. He's still got work to do. You know, Jadon Sancho has been taken out the firing line, if you like, because he's not been playing well, but he speaks in a very pragmatic and realistic way, Erik Ten Hag. And it's really nice to watch Marcus Rashford smiling, enjoying his football, scoring goals like the one he scored against Burnley. But the other point you mentioned is true. United have scored 20 league goals this season. Manchester City have scored 40. This is a low-scoring team. So there have been clean sheets, which was needed after that horrendous start. But look at the goal difference. It's currently 0, which is it's bizarre. So look at the next games. Forest, Wolves away. They're having a bad season. Bournemouth at Old Trafford. You've got to be winning them games.
Andy, enjoy the Christmas. Thanks for joining us so often throughout the year, and no doubt we'll talk to you in 2023.